myself and Tal want to discuss.
Okay. Okay. So this is the Nephew SIG release meetings for August 7th, 2023. Okay. So we can have a very quick update from Rado if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
So
So
get that out of the way
so,
first, and then we'll
yeah.
go
So
okay, go ahead.
yeah. So what I was saying last week, we've cut the 101 release, which is still largely a manual process, but I'm working on automating it. So not much really to put on agenda. I'm still on the subject. And the second thing I'm working on is to have end-to-end tests running on content of the PRs. So then we'll be also able to test whatever we submitting for.
Yeah. So yeah, we talked about that for the anything that get off the 1.0 branch, which is 1.01 would be off of that too. Yeah, we should run end-to-end tests for even every submit, every commit to ensure that it doesn't break the end-to-end test. But then automating the end-to-end test, that didn't seem to have problems, or is that seems to be something okay that we can do? We can invoke by prow.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So those are the two things I'm working on.
Yeah.
And so last week the release, the 101 has been done. It passes the end-to-end tests. There were no problems reported there. So the actual R1 release will point to this one.
I saw Victor saying something about the frickiness of 009.
It happens from time to time, and
okay.
John was investigating this. I'm not really up to speed with what's causing it.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's basically what's from my side.
Okay.
For this meeting, I see that Vish has.
Yeah, Vish, go ahead.
Oh yeah. So the end-to-end test that you're mentioning, I know did you mention that you want it for every commit as well? And I think we also
for 1.0 branch and all the things that pull off of 1.0 branch.
Correct.
So not for main, for sure.
Okay. So we'll definitely have an option for end users or any PR authors to be able to, I think it might already be there, to do a E2E test initiation, right? That can be done.
In automated fashions by.
I mean, I'm saying at least a manual process is also available at this point of time.
Well, manual process we can enforce because that basically means we ask all the people who submit any patches at all to manually run the test before committing, and then we trust them that it was already passed when they said so.
So definitely,
which is okay. I mean, our community members aren't really that many, and we trust all of them. That said, I mean, it would be nice to see if that would work. If we,
it's like everybody does their best interest. It's not about people not doing
no.
the best.
We trust people,
catching the issues because
what I'm saying is it's also a good exercise for us to see if the end-to-end test is something we can run. Because moving forward, at the very least, the end-to-end test by itself will likely be adding more stuff for the main branch, and then we would like to at least run it as an interval test, not a pre-submit, but then at least an interval like daily or hourly or whatever.
So it takes about 700 seconds to run a successful end-to-end test at this point of time. So I think we should be good on that. It doesn't take like 60 minutes. So it takes like 600 to 700 seconds.
Yeah, if you have the VM pre-provisions, it would be very fast. Yes. although one of the end-to-end tests is to create kind clusters, but the kind clusters are fast. The VMs are what takes a long time. So. Okay. No. So it sounds like what Rado said is that shouldn't be a problem. So I would that sounds good. So the agenda item from Tal, if there's nothing else from you guys.
Rado, just to understand that you want to make it an automated thing.
For 1.0 for now.
Yeah.
I mean, if it doesn't happen before tomorrow, then obviously it's okay. We will trust that everyone who submit anything at all, which so far is just John, really, into 1.0 related branches would be would be manually running those end to end, which obviously John has been doing. So we trust him to do the right thing. Moving forward, hopefully there won't be a lot of patches that needs to go into a 1.0 branch or whatever associated labels branches. And if they do, for me, it's more like an exercise. If we can do it, because at some point, if we open up, I mean, and technically speaking, it's already opened up. So if we open up the main branch for people to start committing 1.1 stuff, then it would be great to run the interval, at least run the end-to-end test as an interval test, to ensure that whatever, if there's a rush of patches coming in, which probably won't for now, we would still be able to catch a number of patches that would cause the breakage. So it's more like a quick exercise to see if it works. Otherwise, there's nothing significant into making it work yet. Before tomorrow, obviously not. So yeah, I did ask, I think, after we make the end-to-end call work, that once we pull the 1.0 branch, then we would then anyone who make any patches would run the end-to-end test before submitting the PL. But obviously John sort of does it like the other way. No, actually John does it the run the test and then submit. He usually put the commit and say that I've run the end-to-end test to ensure that it works. So far has it been pretty good out of that. But then I would like to see the main branch would be running the end-to-end test as an interval test, as a periodic test. Cool. Okay. So well, Tal, all yours. Anything?
Looks like one of the towels disappeared. There were two towels at some point of time.
Oh, the Tal and Tal.
Oh, they're back.
Oh, sorry, my browser kept crashing.
Obviously not Chrome then.
Yeah, I usually use Firefox, but Firefox, Zoom made some changes recently that I think are very unfriendly to Firefox.
Okay.
As Google employees, are you allowed to use Firefox? Sorry.
Any browser is fine, I guess.
Yeah, well, for my whole open source work, I just use a completely different computer even.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Tal. You have.
Oh, okay. Yeah, let me. So yeah, Stephen, to bring you a little bit up to speed, I hope you can click the link that I put in the agenda that goes to the SIG2 agenda, where.
Okay.
So the issue that came up was that we have a contribution from Samsung regarding Helm support. They would like to contribute it to the code base. The thing is, we don't have a policy quite yet for how we add, new repositories, POCs, ecosystem, advanced contributions, things like that. Generally, our Nephio project GitHub group has been kind of messy. We don't have a very good naming convention. We talked about changing it, but we decided to postpone that after R1. So I think it's time, maybe now that we have this use case, let's call it that we have a contribution that we don't quite know what to do with it. It might be a time to decide.
Yeah, and so I saw the Slack. I saw the Slack message, and I actually responded. So I said previously we've done it by just parking it into PLCs with an S repo, which luckily John did not archive, so it's still a valid repo, if you will. And then if I remember correctly, other than a few things from your stuff, for example, from Tal or from Dimitrios, stuff, it's basically a document and points people into the remote repo. And from all of those things, for R1, only the 35GC operator, basically. So we that operator is what we use for the ONE Summit. And then when kind of like lost.
Yeah, I think
Anyway.
I think we're most of us are aware of what we have
Yeah.
in the project.
Yeah. So when Danny's volunteers, he basically pulled it directly from that. So we never even took things directly from POCs other than OE Summit. We never took it directly from from the POCs. So this is not a good process, obviously. And then it was pretty ad hoc when we were trying to pull it off. I think Victor was saying some incubation pieces and so on. We are using something external, even for our one, the Vim's entire IPAM things, which is pretty integral for our end-to-end test. At the very least, it's an external thing that we're using right now that we never ported into Nepio repos.
Well, I mean, in a way, that's okay. We have so many dependencies, right? So that's another dependency. I think that's a separate issue. I think that the question that I'm putting here is, should we treat Nepio project group as our distribution, right? I think that would be a very clear demarcation. That is, everything that's in all repositories that are there are part of the distribution. This would make it very easy, I think, for newcomers to come in and look and see, and they know that all of these are components. Right now, we have a lot of stuff that's not components, right, of the distribution.
Yeah, right.
So it's
so
not
we did archive some of the things that we did earlier, and then we make it into non-official.
That's true. But we don't, for new stuff, that's not what we can do. The question is, that I'm phrasing here, would it be useful just to have a different GitHub group for everything that's not part of the distribution? It's still related to Nepio, it's POCs, incubation, all these various contributions that don't quite fit, that aren't part of our distribution could be there. This has all these technical advantages. That's why I wanted to put it in SIG Release, because, for example, you can have scripts that, I don't know, take everything from the group and tag it, right? For example, we have this idea, we need to tag certain things for the distribution. Well, we kind of have to pick very specific repos to tag it, because not everything, is part of the distribution. So that would...
Yeah, because right for our one, Rado did limit the groups. It's not like we tag every single repo for 1.0. So there's
which is not the end of the world. I mean, the thing is, there are technical...
But I guess, as you said, newcomers, is not obvious which one is 1.0. It's not.
Exactly.
They have to go into every one of them and see, oh, is that like a 1.0 tag onto any of these repos?
Right.
Yeah. So no,
the naming convention is confusing too. So I mean, we could solve this by just putting a naming convention, like we talked about this before. We didn't really make a decision. Like, for example, anything that's incubating could have an incubation prefix, right? Something like that. Anything that's a POC would have a POC prefix, so people would be clear that these are not, just at a glance, you would know what is what is a POC, right? We do have confusingly we have a Nepio-POC repo and also a Nepio-POCs repo.
So the POC repo has since been archived.
Right.
The POC was some very quick and dirty things that John did.
Exactly.
Back in August last year, I think. Yeah.
Right. That was the workshop. Right.
No, actually, we didn't even use it for the workshop. It's basically more like a demo.
Yeah.
After that, we use something else. Yeah.
So I think, this is one issue that's coming right now, what to do with this new contribution coming in.
Yeah.
But it might be an opportunity for us to do this right and maybe organize how we think of our GitHub repos and everything. So, I have my ideas here. I hope people can read what's on the screen and see the result of our discussion there. And yeah, but I wanted to bring it here in SIG Release because here we have maybe a different, more technical perspective over this. So I don't have an answer, right? I have my proposal. I think having it as a separate GitHub group could be convenient. Although if we do that, that does mean another group. Every group has its own permissions, right? Things like that. So it's not completely...
Well, I kind of like Victor's suggestions. We may want to kind of check out how Kubernetes does it for incubations, Sandbox and Graduate projects. But then, that basically means, but this only works because each of the projects has its own repo, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah,
well, Kubernetes also had kind of an ad hoc way of evolving as well. And Kubernetes
actually, it's less Kubernetes, it's actually more CNCF. But yeah, sure.
Okay, yeah, so that would be different, right? Because Kubernetes has very, very, very big repos with lots of directories. I find it very cumbersome. So
yeah, even the experimental stuff, they probably just dump it into a particular directory, I guess.
Right.
In that case, yeah.
Yeah,
sorry,
there's a lot of
having your
cruft.
hand up for a while.
There's a lot of cruft in FEO repos that I don't think helps anybody. It's very there's a lot of like just orphaned code.
I guess some of the admin, the leaders, the community leaders didn't expect that much contribution coming in so quickly.
Well, it's very hard because the farther you are in a project, the harder it is to do those kinds of refactoring.
Yeah, to retroactively make changes.
Exactly. So we're still pretty early in FEO, so I think it's the sooner we have a
we've
system.
actually already done something that I don't think they've done, which is like we're creating repos, a lot of repos for different things, which is not what Kubernetes did probably when they started.
Right.
So there's some. So the drawback of that is once we allow that to happen, which was actually what you asked, I remember when we had early SIG release meetings, is that we have a major proliferations of repos. We have like what do we have now, like 20-ish in under Nefio. So it is getting a bit confusing, I think, for folks. Yeah, but it's a little better organized by developers. But then what goes through release and things like that would also be pretty tough to browse through.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we who have been around here since the beginning, we're pretty familiar with all the repos. But I think for newcomers, it's extremely confusing.
Yeah.
So I'm not quite sure how to.
Sorry about that, Vish. I think Vish may have an
opinion. No worries.
Oh yeah, go ahead. Sorry. Yeah.
No. It's all good. I mean, I know, funny you say that we are all familiar. There are sometimes even I'm not familiar.
Yeah, I know. Sometimes I get confused.
It's like, I'm thinking, wait a minute, because I was going to ask the question. My hand was raised when you said that, Tim Wim's backhand and that resource allocation thing. Is it now, where is that repo currently?
Yeah, it's a Nokia repo.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not even open source yet.
Correct. Because so far what we have, I think, is ours is actually, again, correct me if I'm wrong here. I think it's a sandbox that we have, right? Basically, where we have all these things doing. In the actual deployment, this is exactly not how we will be deploying. Basically, it will be real clusters. So with that said, and in the context of Tal, when you talked about Samsung's, do you know, I mean, this is a question I'd asked. It's like, hey, if somebody were to be guided to contribute to Nefio, are we going to be like making them familiar with those 3 pillars that we have and tell them that, hey, look, this is probably where your contribution fits in? Or are we trying to expand outside of that? Again, it's all open questions. I don't know. I haven't done any analysis.
Well, so this is why I think having a separate group. So this is the first decision that I think we should make. One is, do we want to have our main group, the distribution, and have a separate group for everything else? So the separate group could have very lax requirements for joining, right? It's basically anybody who wants to contribute something that's not offensive to the main pillars in some way could just go in there. And at some point, if we decide to make it a component, then we can, have some sort of incubation process. I don't know if we quite need that quite yet, right?
So you're suggesting one of the other groups, we don't even need someone to approve the check-in. They can basically just dump stuff in there.
Well, no, I think we still need
I don't think
approval, but I think very lax requirements for approval, right? Because anything that goes there is not part of the distribution. It's a POC, it's an idea, it's an example, it's a test, it's something like that. Some sort of ecosystem contribution, right? Okay. So it can have very lax requirements, and people know when they go there that it's just a jumble of things, right? But their questions are, would that separate group also require the CLA, right? That was my first question. I would think yes.
Yeah, I don't think we have ever intended anything that goes into any of the Nephio repos, even different GitHub groups would be someone who didn't sign it as the CLA.
Right. It would still be part of Nephio, but it would be kind of in the not part of the distribution, right? So
yeah, because right now by default, any repos under Nephio projects so immediately inherits the pre-submit check of the CLA.
Also true, right. So if somebody does some sort of experiment, they would not want to inherit that, right? They would not actually, even more than that, we would not want Prow involved in the second group at all.
So
right?
some of this.
So Tal,
Go ahead.
okay. So Tal, a couple of questions. So you said different group. So what do you think that group, for example, what do you think the name could be? That's one thing. The second thing is, let's say some POCs are, in this particular case, is essentially a tool chain we are talking about, this particular SDK stuff. So that's basically, it's most like a Nephio, it could be an operator or a tool. So what is the graduation process? When I say graduation, please do not read it as the graduation as CNCF, but how does it move from that report to the main Nephio report? What is the process for that? What do you think about those things?
Yeah, so I don't think we're ready or need quite to have an incubation process at this point, but
yeah, I agree with that. Yeah,
I think, if we'll all be working on both groups, I guess, and if at some point we decide, it would just, we could move repos, right, as well, or we can copy or fork or do whatever we need to do. If somebody makes, let's take this example of the Helm translator project from Samsung.
Yeah.
Let's say that for R3 we decide that's the way to go. We really like it, and we want, we all agree that it should be part. So yeah, we have the repo there, and then we can decide how to integrate it into the main distribution of Nephio somehow, right? So in a way, it's not too different than just having another GitHub repository elsewhere. But it's
my question is, do we physically move from that group to?
We could. I mean, we would decide on a case-by-case basis. If the code is ready to be just merged into the distribution, we can do that. If it's not, then we could fork or even just copy, right? It's kind of up to us. This is kind of an open area, right?
Okay. I just wanted to know your thoughts on that. Yeah.
That's my thinking, yeah. And I suggested a name, something like Nephio Ecosystem, but it could be Nephio POCs, but I think that's kind of limiting. I think if we keep it a very generic name, basically anything that's associated with Nephio and the CLA has been signed, that's again the important part. These are actual contributions to Nephio.
But I mean, I would imagine people who wants to park the code there has an intent to move it from the incubation group to, or whatever that group, to the more release group. Otherwise, they could just link it as an external project.
They could, but if they want it closely associated with the project, like Samsung does right now, I mean, Samsung could just create their own GitHub group and just publish it on GitHub without any relation to Nephio.
Correct.
However,
that's what I was thinking, Tal. So in this particular case, are they actually going to be deploying, actually publishing operators and publishing some packages, which can be next, sort of deployed on either the Nephio management system or on its managed clusters. So if that becomes the case, it doesn't prevent anybody from going off and writing operators or coming up with their writing those packages. They need to be aware of some of the KRM principles, right?
Yeah, this is a good point, but there are technical issues with companies. Not every company is like Red Hat that can publish open source code whenever they want. So a lot of companies have internal processes. So if they already have the process in place for contributing to Nephio, which Samsung does, right? They already approved the Nephio CLA and approved contributions to Nephio, then they can use that same CLA basically to publish to this extra GitHub group without any issues, right? So it's a way for them to publish as well, right? So we're actually creating an easier way for distributing it's open source code, right?
Okay, let me ask you this question. Trying to understand this better. Like, let's say I'm working for a company that has got a little more restrictions on this open source thing, but me as this company at this point of time, I can have my own private GitHub repo. I've gone ahead, created my operators. I've actually put some packages there. I follow some of the Nefio examples, sandbox examples, and do that in my own environment in my company. I'm actually going off and trying this out and actually attempting to deploy these packages and see everything works the Nefio way. Is this the kind of contributions in some cases are open and in some cases are actually closed that you foresee? I'm making this as a generic thing. I don't know if the question makes sense.
I don't think we want to treat it as a complete garbage pail for anybody to do whatever they want, right? So if people have technical issues that they need, I don't know, this GitHub group, well, no.
Okay.
I think we want things to be potential contributions to Nefio at least, right? To be in line with what Nefio is. But
It could be a solution that can be used. For example, if this particular thing that you said about Samsung wanting to do this Elm to is it Elm to operator or something?
Yeah.
So it could be an optional package that can be packaged. If somebody might want that, it's a selection at install time that you can use that as a package.
Yeah, well, it's some sort of reference implementation. Solution was a good word. POCs, examples.
Okay.
It's actually also a tool, right? Maybe a tool. Yeah.
Yeah, it could be a tool, and it could actually be components that people are proposing to eventually come into Nefio, right? So, yeah, so I mean that's a time where we might have some sort of incubation, but incubation is a very big word, right? So some of us have some battle scars from other open source telco projects that did involve incubation, right? And these are kind of projects of projects, right? So the ONAP project was so big that it had lots of sub-projects. And there was a process by which you can add a sub-project, and it became very confusing to know, what is, if you go to ONAP and just try to click download, there's no such thing. There's so many different components. It's really hard to know what you need and what you don't need and how to pick and choose. In our case, we're doing something much smaller, a much smaller project. And I don't think we actually need subcomponents and optional components and things like that quite yet. But who knows, eventually we might need, for example, we might want a complete, I'm just throwing an example, complete analytics data gathering component for Nefio that we think is not part of the core, but it's its own sub-project that people could potentially use, right? So we might want that as a completely separate component, and then we would need maybe some incubation process for that, right?
Yeah, for example, I don't think 3.5GC is always going to be a core component, right? It is a workload. We have a solution. So
yeah, so that's an interesting question.
So far we include 3.5GC as a core component, because in a way we're treating it like a default.
Reference. I would call it a reference
solution.
Yeah, reference.
I would call that the reference implementation.
Yes.
So if you click download, right? We don't have that quite, but let's say you have a download Nefio button, right? What's included in that? So eventually we will want to separate it to a Nefio core that you need to function, and the core would not include anything, no operators, no nothing, just the main components needed for Nefio to run. Not even config sync, I think. It would include Porch, because Porch for now is the centerpiece for getting Nefio to run, but it would not include 3.5GC. So
yep.
We do have an Nefio core and we have an Nefio reference implementation. Right now with R1, they're very much mixed together, right? So they're not easily separatable, but eventually I think we want them to be more separate, right?
Yeah, I sort of make that akin to the OpenStack Neutron. If you use Neutron, by default, the install script install OVS plugin or ML2 drivers.
So in this case, Porch will be installed.
Yeah, but then so 3.5GC would be the default. You can comment out that line and put another driver if you if that's the target network functions that you want to go for. But then again, we only have one right now, so but hopefully a lot more moving forward. But anyway, so the GitHub group suggestion is actually pretty good. So that's a good breakdown. So we should explore. Is there like major disruption or anything like that to the current repo?
I think the main con is that it requires giving people permissions, admin permissions and everything for the separate group. Like we'll have to manage them separately because that's how, as far as I know, that's how.
Meaning that admin for the group for being a committer, or just contributors obviously probably doesn't need any admin access, right?
Yeah. I don't necessarily mean admin, but all the different permissions. But to be honest, I'm sure we're not the only organization that has this issue with GitHub. I think a lot of organizations use multiple groups. I wonder if there are tools in GitHub to kind of associate groups together in some way under a specific organization. I don't know. I don't know if that exists. Like big enterprise users for GitHub probably have similar needs. I don't know if you can manage users across groups or something like that. I don't know.
Okay. It's probably
so to all listeners, akin to Nephio's -project, we are suggesting something like Nephio-ecosystem, something like that.
Yeah, I'm very, if anybody has other ideas for names, that's great. I just threw that in.
Pardon. So we might still have some further questions on this, as and then we get more information. For example, I'm thinking at this point of time, like, by default, when you actually bring up Nephio, you have a bunch of repositories that are registered, which are the core repositories, right? If somebody comes up with a solution and they want it to be part of Nephio, is it something like we're going to say that, yes, it's an approved repository of Nephio and we're going to be including it as part of distribution? That is how I'm thinking in my mind right now, right?
Yeah.
In this particular case, if Samsung brought this a solution where they have it in their controlled GitHub environment, and they push that package, and they probably at some point of time they want to be like saying, hey, we have these packages out there that can be consumed by Nephio at this point of time. So please, can you have this as your solution? Is one way I'm thinking in my head with whatever we have been doing so far in the sandbox.
Yeah. Well, until now, we've decided together as a community to shape the product, right? So I don't think there's any difference there, right? We get proposals, design proposals, implementation proposals, execution proposals, and we have the 3 SIGs where we meet and discuss together and make decisions. Until now, I think our decision process has been okay. We didn't have any huge conflicts, right? But we have a procedure in place. Let's. I don't want to pick on Samsung here, but let's say somebody in the future brings some contribution to Nephio that they strongly think should be part of Nephio, but there's a lot of resistance in the community. So we bring it to a TSC vote. That's why we have a TSC at the end of the day, to decide what the project is, what the product is. If it gets to a point that we can't agree as a community, right?
By the way, Stephen, this is the same topic. And I said I have a topic to discuss. This is the same topic I want to discuss.
Yeah, let's investigate. Create another group would also have to go through asking LF and others too, because they're managing it.
Well, we'll also have to get the TSC's opinion.
Yeah,
on this,
that too.
Right. I mean, I think a very valid, that Wim said, others have said too, is like, just say no. If somebody wants to, if Samsung wants to bring this in, then we can say, well, just put it on your own, publish it on your own, right? Which I think that's a valid response, but I would like our community to be welcoming, and and if we can give a technical, easy way for Samsung to contribute and to showcase their contribution, because it was done and presented as part of their work on Nephio, right? So. I think we could be more welcoming, right, in that respect. So
correct, and guiding.
Almost, yeah. In that case, it seems like either they wrote it for Nephio, or at least they would like to have this as part of Nephio. In which case, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm picking on them again, but I'm just assuming that we will have similar.
Well, so this would be the case, is what I'm saying. The case is you want this to be part of Nephio repo, either something that you've done previously or something that you've just built specifically for Nephio, but then the community has not converged yet. In which case we may find a place for them to park. So that may make sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. It's kind of a parking place. It's not necessarily the final destination, but it could be. You know, some things. I imagine a lot of POCs won't have any legs. You know?
Yeah.
I think at the least we need to be able to guide them. Hey, if it needs to be, if you want to try it out before you come here and you want to make sure you want it to be part of it, these are the steps you might want to be able to do it, and then prove it out and come to us. That's one of the solutions, maybe at least. We need to guide them.
Right, and you're still signing the CLA. That's the important part. It's not just a random repository. Anything there, I think, should still be under the CLA and have Nefio authors under it. So you are giving a copyright permission to Nefio. So if that's something you want to do, and Samsung wants to do, I mean, they were clear that they want to contribute it. So so yeah, and if you don't, if this is not what you want, then just publish it on GitHub on your own, right? Or anywhere else for that matter, right? So so I do think, you know, the answer to question one, in my view, is it should still be under the CLA. So these are still part of the Nefio code base. They're just not part of the distribution, right? So so it means, you know, 3 years from now, somebody can still go to that code and do whatever they want with it because it's under the CLA and under a copyright. Yeah, you know.
Right. It's a little more control for us too, because if we have external dependencies, like Vim's IPAM, if Nokia decided to just completely close it, then suddenly our end-to-end test and everything would be broken.
Well, that's also a point, although the license is Apache, so
that is a sandbox basically, right? But that sandbox.
No, but then we can control the code. If the code's under our own groups, GitHub groups, then it would be. Then we at least have a copy.
Yeah, I mean, just on that particular case, he wants to push it, but he was just waiting for taking time, I guess. Vim.
No, I'm not saying that's the case. Right? Yeah, of course. No, he talked about trying to put it into Nefio.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't even think Nokia has a problem with that, but then it just, well, we never actually get to execute that part for R1, obviously.
Yeah, basically it's a big one. He wanted to divide that into multiple.
He wrote it maybe a while back, and then immediately it was used for any summit. So it was, from that point on, we never actually thought about using something else.
Yeah. So, you know, if we do create this group, then there are immediately a couple or even more repositories that we should move there, right, from the main Nefio group, because they're not part of the distribution. We have a bunch that aren't part of the distribution, right? So, we can basically make a proposal to TSC if that's what the community wants. We can post that on SIG Release and see whether or not like other people have any opinions. But I guess you folks have talked about that on SIG 2 meeting last week. I wasn't here. So.
Yeah, we discussed this.
I haven't seen the recording either.
I just came back in this forum when you are here, and then we wanted to take it to the TSC.
Okay.
I'm sure there's going to be a bunch of frequently asked questions that will come out, and people probably need clarity on this because even I mean,
TSC would probably ask for like a process and all that stuff too. How does it work? Some governance documentations.
So one other main thing that we need to discuss is so this Nefio ecosystem. So what is the criteria for getting into this particular thing? So obviously we discussed. So anything else that's I wanted to ask this question to you. So are you envisioning only this kind of a POC or proof or some kind of a demo, those kind of spikes kind of code, those are the ones that are getting into this ecosystem?
Well, you know, I don't really know.
I just wanted to make sure.
I don't think we need to decide on entirely complicated processes right now, right, for incubation and things like that.
No, not that process. I'm thinking, what do you think is going to get into that particular new group?
Yeah, so things like what Samsung is doing. So POCs, solutions, examples, experiments, things like that.
So can we please have that one-liner there? That would be really,
that's a good idea.
The one that you said, it's very, very, very nice. what will get, yeah, that would be.
Well, also really is something that you really want Nephio to go into Nephio main repo at some point. Although it may or may not happen. But then the intent is to contribute that into Nephio core or official repo, because obviously we do want to have a process of graduations or like not happening at all. So, I mean, if it's some external things that you're building for something else, it's probably better to store it into your own repo while it's being used by Nephio.
Yeah, that makes it very clear. Thanks, Tal, for that one. Yeah. So yeah, I think obviously anything that gets in has to gel well with the philosophies of Nephio, like 3 pillars or whatever the subgroups of SIG architecture you're deciding at this point of time. There are different scopes on the UI, UX, tool chains, etc. So anything that falls into those categories that can get into this particular group. Yeah, cool.
Okay. By the way, is anyone volunteering to write up a proposal so we can maybe send it to a TSC?
I think the TSC, so it's interesting, right? I think there's a good chance that TSC will say, like, you guys decide, because it's a technical issue.
Most likely they will ask us to come with a proposal. I think that's fine.
Yeah.
Sure. So what I can do maybe in the next TSC meeting, I can present this summary here and say that our opinion is on A.
Yes.
Yeah. So they just know that we've done our homework, our diligence, and explored the options, and we can explain why, and we can have a discussion. We may get feedback there that's actually opposed to this in some way. I don't really expect it, but
so
yeah.
I wanted to ask Rado, since he's been silent. Rado, what do you think about the method that we discussed? Do you see any issues, or do you have any feedback on this one?
Well, I like it. I like it a lot. It will not only that lower the kind of like the entry thing that you have to cross to contribute to the project, and yeah, with the CLA it will make the whole process easy to include it to, let's say, to the core. And what I was also thinking, making people keep these things in their repos has, for me, at least one disadvantage, that it might be gone at one point. So people get fired or just leave the company and nobody maintains it, or just, somebody will just delete the repo or something. If we kind of keep it in our, let's say, space, then, of course, taking in account the licensing, copyright and stuff like this, but in case, somebody just, stops developing it or just removes it or whatever, in this way, we'll kind of, if we need it, we'll kind of also have this still in our repos. So that's pretty cool. And yeah, of course, we don't have to, include everything that's gonna be pushed there. And probably in the future, some process for graduating these projects to be included into the core will have to be established. But I guess this is more like a TSC problem, I would say, how to do this from like more formal side, because from the release point of view, it will be just whatever, the tagging some other repo as well. And as for the permissions, I don't think it's a big problem. This will probably have to be set up via groups, and then you will just, add and remove users from this group. So I don't think this will present any big problems to manage. Yeah, I guess those are my insights to hold this whole thing. I think it's a brilliant idea.
Cool.
Cool. Thanks, Trevor. Yeah.
We'll have Tal present it.
That's one of our main things. We wanted to take the blessings from Rado, since he's well versed with all the tool chains associated with this one. So
correct, and your feedback too, Bala, as a experienced project manager. So so yeah, I just thinking about this, actually having separate permissions could be an advantage at some point. If we need, if somebody for some reason has, let's say somebody has an experiment in this extra group that they do want to, I don't know, install not Prow, but maybe some other tool to test out or something like that, and they need admin permission. So we can do things there that will keep the main distribution, more secure in a way. So it could actually be an advantage having a separate set of permissions there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so
Yeah,
Tal
cool.
can
Yeah, I
just
think,
present this on the next TFC meeting then.
Yeah,
That's
I'll
good.
do that. I'll turn it into a slide or something.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Anything else from anyone? Cool. Well, thank you.
Thanks, Tal, for bringing this disclosure. Appreciate it. Yeah.
Sure, my pleasure. Welcome back, Stephen, and Bala too.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Bye.
Have a good one.
All right,
Bye.
great. Thanks, everybody.